I'm going to look at deploying blockchain technologies in the fight against corruption, as has been mentioned. So I'll go straight to look at the blockchain technologies, and it's good that we have had the video that gave us some background or information as to blockchain. So blockchain emerged first in the financial industry, building on cryptocurrency such as Bitcoin, as we have watched in the video. But obviously, blockchain is not Bitcoin. Bitcoin is one of its applications, an important one though. So blockchain have been associated with Bitcoin for some time now, but we should understand that blockchain is not Bitcoin. The requirement and implication of blockchain in the public sector, however, are yet to be fully understood. Blockchain is generating much interest because of the potential it holds to transform the way government works and to create trust in government. So blockchain solutions and its disruptive potential cannot be overstated. Blockchain has the potential for key functions such as the verification of identity, the registry of assets, and the certification of transactions. The problem blockchain seeks to address is to ensure the security and integrity of information. Now, it is a technology that allows one to record assets, transfer value, and track transactions in a decentralized manner, ensuring the transparency, integrity, and traceability of data without a central authority to authenticate the information. It is essentially a system to encrypt information and a shared database. It is based on consensus mechanism among trusted parties to certify the information and validate transactions. So why anti-corruption? Blockchain has two distinctive features that makes it a potent tool against corruption. First, it provides an unprecedented level of security of information, and the integrity of records is managed, guaranteeing their authenticity. It eliminates opportunity for falsification and the risk associated with having a single point of management of data. It also helps to overcome the data silos in traditional bureaucracies in which public entities are reluctant to share information among themselves. Second, blockchain provides a transparent and decentralized system to record a sequence of transactions or blocks. Blockchain creates immutable trail of transactions, allowing for full traceability of every transaction. Now, according to New America, a think tank, a public blockchain provides regulators and law enforcement with a roadmap to identify illicit activities or malfeasance by leaving enough digital clues to identify bad actors. So blockchain is always being tested to create tamper-proof company registries, making it a potentially powerful tool to ascertain a company's beneficial owners. Now, these blockchain-based company registries can make know your customer regulations easier to comply with and provide reliable information or the ultimate beneficial ownership of companies. So that if we're using blockchain, you don't need any leaks. You don't need any Panama leaks or WikiLeaks or whatever, because everybody can see what is there. Nobody can hide your transactions. It's there for the public to see. So it's a very, very important tool or technology. In USA, corporations to utilize blockchain for registration and transfer of ownership stock is an example of using blockchain. Blockchain is particularly suited to fight corruption in the registry of assets and the tracking of transactions such as procurement processes by leveraging a shared and distributed database of ledgers. It eliminates the need for intermediaries, cutting red tape and reducing discretion. Governments around the world have started piloting a variety of blockchain-based applications to strengthen public integrity. For example, India, Dubai, United States of America, Estonia, Moldova, Jamaica, etc. Jamaica, for example, is establishing a national identity system which will also be instrumental in countering money laundering by improving identity verification and the application of Know Your Customer regulation. In India, India is providing a single digital identity to its citizens using biometric technology. Estonia is operating a national digital identity scheme where personal information is stored on a distributed ledger that individuals control. Interestingly, each of these three systems encrypt identity information, but not yet through blockchain technology, though. Sweden is testing a blockchain-powered land registry to make details of real estate transactions visible to all interested parties. And Georgia has started registering land titles using blockchain. And Ukraine is looking into blockchain to reform its land registry process. Ghana, where an estimated 78% of the land is unregistered, is a good candidate for blockchain. Dubai has created an ambitious Dubai blockchain strategy that seeks gains in public efficiency, cutting paper costs, and eliminating the red tape by putting all city transactions on blockchain. And I quote, we want to make Dubai the first blockchain-powered government in the world starting from 2020 by the Director General of Smart Dubai. So Dubai from this year, want to implement blockchain across. So 3 applications of blockchain. There are 3 important value propositions or applications for blockchain in combating corruption. The first one is verifying identity. Second one is registering assets. And the third one is tracking transactions. because blockchain decentralized nature and the immutability of its record makes it a powerful tool in the fight against the corrupt practices and crime, such as illicit trade, human trafficking, and money laundering. So if we look at verifying identity, a universal and secure legal identity provides the foundation to fight money laundering by allowing one to authenticate the identity of individual and corporation. A set of blockchain applications to combat corruption focus on automating and tracking high-risk transactions, such as public contracts, cash transfer, and aid funds. Each year, according to the OECD, an estimated 9.5 trillion US dollars is spent on public sector contracts and large public investment projects. It's also estimated that corruption adds up to 10% of the total cost of doing business globally, and up to 25% of the cost of procurement contracts in developing countries. Up to 25% of the total cost. That's huge in terms of corruption. So technology-driven solutions provide transparency in public contracting, allowing one to detect red flags, bid rigging, phantom vendors, and price fixing using advanced analytics called blockchain. So the blockchain could add a critical value to public contracting up to the delivery of the goods and services by locking in critical information at every step of the procurement chain that can be monitored, tracked, and audited, and yet you cannot change it. You mentioned about smart contracts. You see, smart contract is a transaction protocol programmed onto blockchain, which is intended to automatically execute, control, or document legally relevant events and actions according to the terms of a contract or an agreement. Now, this will reduce the opportunities for fiddling with the process and increase the speed of the transaction. Obviously, there are some limitations or requirements for implementing blockchain. You see, potentially, blockchain technology can make a critical contribution to fighting corruption and anchoring integrity in the public sector. But we must be mindful of its requirements and limitations. Regulatory uncertainty, the governance of blockchain. As a decentralized system, blockchain is supposed to be self-governing. So government opting for a public permissionless or permission-free blockchain will have to accept that it will have virtually no control over how the system is governed. The reliability of records, especially for the first entry, is critical for the successful implementation of the blockchain in government. If you listen to the video, the very first block is important because that make no reference to any previous block. The very first block is important. So there will be always the need for a gatekeeper to ensure the veracity of the information entered into the individual blocks. Because like any other database, in blockchain also, garbage in, garbage out system. So particularly the first block, the information we're going to use should be accurate and should be verified as such. Now, this means that the reliability of records stored on it depends entirely on how they are originated, the data or the record. If these conditions are not met, it is more important to fix them first before considering a blockchain. This is why government deploying blockchain to protect public data and registers should first address the weaknesses of institutions handling this data or records to make them reliable and accurate. There are some challenges of blockchain. Application of blockchain-based solutions in public sector have remained limited in scope, and their cost and scalability remains an open question. Considering their governance requirement and the amount of energy they consumed, blockchain will not replace the need for stronger institutions, no. In fact, it can be most effective when we have strengthened institutions doing their work well with accurate data and records. Now, big data, let me say a little bit about big data technology, because big data technology could be a promising investigatory tool to fight corruption as well. Because the technology makes it possible to disaggregate or disaggregate data on government spending and contracting, and to analyze it for sign of waste, fraud, and corruption. It could be used also to identify patterns of corrupt practices, such as whose family members got too many contracts. Because if you use big data technology, within the shortest possible time, they can look at all the transactions. They can look at all the trends. It will give you who is connected to who, whose son, family, wife, uncle, aunt, school mate is who. So they can see the connections and give you all the connections in the transaction. So it can tell you the patterns in corruption transactions. In fact, these technologies you have nowhere to hide. So what are the prerequisites? There are a number of prerequisites that ought to be met for blockchain application to be effective. And these include: one, the existing data must be accurate, and I can't emphasize on that more, because if it's not accurate, then that means garbage in, garbage out. Two, registries or records or transactions must be digitalized, because if they are not, you cannot put them onto the blockchain. Digital identity systems should be reliable, and existence of sufficient connectivity and energy must be in place, because blockchain, like any other technology, consumes energy, because you're going to deploy a lot of computers. The population should be tech aware, and that means that the population should know how to use technology. And the reason why blockchain is going to be the future, whether we like it or not, is that the population, the useful population, the millennials who are tech savvy, they are going to use blockchain going forward, because that's what they are born into and that's what they're going to use. So the more the youth use technology, they are becoming computer literate. Technology is going to be, blockchain and big data set technologies are going to be a matter of course. And the older generation have to catch up. And there should be a support service to support the blockchain technology. And that will mean that if you already have a useful population who are tech savvy, that shouldn't be a problem at all. So in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I would say that in a world traumatized by recurrent corruption scandals, The potential for blockchain is enormous, and the promise it holds to eliminate fraud is simply too great to ignore. Records can be encrypted and stored across a network of computers rather than in a central location, so they cannot be altered or stolen. Records such as financial transactions will be visible to the public and yet cannot be altered. So all your transactions, all your records will be there for everybody to see, and yet nobody can change it, including yourself. So you make corruption fight very easy. Investigation becomes very, very easy because the records are there. You don't need Panama leaks or any WikiLeaks because you can see it, but you cannot change it. It's encrypted. This application, it is an application which can also be employed by financial disclosures employed for financial disclosure by public officials or in connection with bids by suppliers of goods and services. Processes which are often so ripe with opportunities for bribery and bid rigging. With blockchain, you cannot rig. The bid will be transparent. The processes will be there for everybody to see, and nobody can change it. So for all its uncertainties and the risk in tackling corruption, these 21st century technologies, such as blockchain and big data, offer new weapons against these devastating practices. So we need now to start thinking about the application of these technologies. Either we do it and get on board and prepare ourselves, or we'll be overcome by events. Because like those days where computers were not the order of the day, we were using typewriters. If at the time somebody have said that we're going to have computers, every home will have a computer, we wouldn't believe it. The same way a time will come where blockchain will be the order of the day. And those who those days were computer literates will be left behind. Government will be left behind if we don't get on board, because it's going to have application not only for corruption, fighting corruption, but as you're going to see again from other presentation coming, its application is so wide and pervasive. We cannot run away from it. It's going to happen whether we like it or not. And that is the future. And before too soon, we will be overwhelmed. And then corruption and anti-corruption agencies work will be easier, because now with blockchain, the public will be anti-corruption agency because they can see what is happening. I can't say enough about this. We must be prepared and start thinking about it, because that is the future. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Say good morning to everyone. It's great to see all of you virtually. And of course, I want to acknowledge and greet all of my former colleagues in the government of Grenada with whom I've worked for many years. Thanks for inviting me, and I will begin to share my screen and thank the Integrity Commission, chairman and members, and of course the management and staff for the kind invitation. So you had quite a bit of a primer on blockchain technology, and therefore my job has been made easier. I do have a couple of slides on what blockchain is all about, but I will touch those very lightly and spend most of my time focused on what ECCB is doing. So the case of ECCB Dcash pilot, that's going to be essentially an example of how blockchain technology can be used. And for those of you who are still wondering about it, hopefully as I go along, you'll get a little clarity about why we're doing this and how it can help in the fight against corruption. So I want to start with this quote, which some of you may have seen, but if you haven't, I think it's interesting for you to take a look. And it says, virtual currencies, perhaps most notably Bitcoin, have captured the imagination of some, struck fear among others, and confused the heck out of the rest of us. And I think that's very apt. And that's by US Senator Tom Copper. And a lot of the confusion comes because of what Bitcoin has done and not done. And as Dr. K indicated earlier, just think about this way. Blockchain technology is the highway. Bitcoin is a vehicle on the highway. And the Dcash pilot, the digital currency of the EC dollar, which I'm going to introduce you to, is another vehicle on the highway. So blockchain is really the infrastructure, and then you can put any number of vehicles on it, and you can name them whatever you want to name them. Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, Libra, whatever you want to name it. Dcash. So keep that in mind and avoid the confusion between blockchain and Bitcoin. They're two separate things. Bitcoin runs on blockchain. That blockchain technology is the road, is the highway, it's the infrastructure. So here's what I want to cover in the time allotted to me. I have about 10-15 minutes, so I'm going to try to do this as efficiently as I can. I start with this question. Which form of cash is better for financial integrity? Which form of cash is better for financial integrity? And when I speak of financial integrity, I'm referring to fighting money laundering, terrorist financing, and fraud. Key examples when we talk about corruption. Which form of cash is better for financial integrity? Is it physical cash or digital cash? Which one is? Which one is? And I'm going to come back to that a little later as I go through, but I want you to think about that. And as I share in the next few slides, hopefully you will come to that answer based on what you hear and see. Now, for a bit of context, we know what the big issue is in terms of corruption and its pervasiveness around the world. No economy, no country is exempt. In the context of the Caribbean, there are several risks and concerns that certainly the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank is focused on. And I've listed 6 of those risks and concerns. There are many more. The risking. Many of you are aware in the last several years of the challenge we've had in this region with maintaining corresponding banking relations, especially for indigenous or national banks. And I think you know what a corresponding banking relation is. When you want to do wires to the US, you want to send money for your child in school, you want to pay for goods and services as a supplier in a business in Grenada or St. Lucia or Jamaica or wherever you are, anywhere in the world, you need to be able to have these facilitations to basically make your payments. We've been challenged in that area. And a bank without a corresponding banking relationship is really not a serious and international bank. It's not in this day and age, you cannot do international business without a correspondent bank or banking relationship. So that is a big issue for us. And part of the reason why this issue has come about is because of perception of less than adequate controls in respect of money laundering and terrorist financing. And I say perception because I think you all know that money laundering in particular and terrorist financing both occur in the large financial centers of the world. The Caribbean is relatively small in the scheme of things. So the biggest money laundering happens in the large financial centers, New York, London, Hong Kong, wherever they are. It's certainly not the Caribbean. But the perception of high risk and money laundering partly driven by international financial services, for example, has created this pressure on our financial institutions. So that's a risk and concern. And I'm going to tie that back a little later in terms of why the ECCB is doing what it's doing with blockchain and digital currency. AML-CFT, you know what that is, anti-money laundering, combating finance and terrorism. Financial exclusion. There are too many people in our region who do not have access or do not have a bank account. That's the problem. And guess what? The risking has made it even harder. It is so difficult to open a bank account now, relatively speaking. Far more difficult in the Caribbean than it is in the United States, for example. And the reason why the banks have obviously gotten so stringent, and Mr. Johnson can attest to that, is because of the pressures to ensure full compliance. And frankly spoken, in some cases, we've gone overboard. But when your correspondent banking relationship is at risk or in jeopardy, you have no choice but to go overboard, lest you get a phone call from any one of the correspondent banks telling you that it's over. And when you ask them why, they tell you it's a business decision. No further answers provided. Some of our banks have actually had this experience. So they have to play it safe. They have to fully comply and perhaps go beyond. To the point now, many of our people, our citizens, have difficulty opening simple bank accounts. What that means is that you're driving people, by the very unintended consequence, driving people out of the financial system and forcing them to use the informal economy, forcing them to use cash, forcing them to use informal means. That is not good for the economy, and actually it hurts the fight against corruption. So we have to be concerned about financial exclusion. We have people who are unbanked and we have people who are underbanked, and we need to get them. And then when you think about people trying to do small businesses and various economic transactions, you have to have some formality. You have to have some arrangements in the system to allow you to transact. And if you don't, you're at a disadvantage. So that's the big issue. Cybersecurity, cyber resilience. Clearly, in this digital age, that is an increasingly important issue. Cybersecurity is, in fact, a national security issue, a global security issue, not just now in the pandemic, but even more so because of our increased reliance on digital tools in this period. And let's face it, digital tools have been a lifeline in this pandemic. Now, inadequate legal and regulatory frameworks. At the end of the day, if you do not have the appropriate frameworks to guide the process, and many of us would know this from our fight with money laundering, where you got to have your legal framework in place, your legislation, but you also have to have effectiveness as an implementation, and therefore you need capacity, institutions to be able to do that, such as the Integrity Commission, for example. Those things are needed, and in some instances are still inadequate in our region. And always there's the issue of consumer protection. In this period of the pandemic, we've seen increasing scams. People offering all sorts of services in the name of COVID-19 pandemic to basically defraud people of their hard-earned money, which is already difficult to come by and made even more so in this difficult period when our economies are in serious difficulty on account of the pandemic, and particularly in our case, the closure of our tourism sector. So at ECCB, we've been warning people about the need to be careful. There are churches who have gotten involved unwittingly in these schemes, thinking that they're helping. Put $10 in and get a circle of this and bring in 5 people and then you will get this. Those are scams, they are schemes. But that is something we need to be concerned about. So it's corruption at multiple levels. Those are some of the risks and concerns, and I just wanted to offer them as context. These are real issues. And when we come to the issue of why ECCB is doing digital currency on blockchain, these are some of the things that are weighing on us and concerning us. You've heard what blockchain is, so I'm going to skip this slide in the interest of time. Essentially, blocks using cryptography to create a digital ledger or an official record, and blocks are groups of transactions or information. Now, there are several types of blockchain, and what I want to focus on this slide is there is a public blockchain, such as what Bitcoin uses, and there is private blockchain, which is where somebody's in charge and somebody determines who gets on the system or is not allowed on the system. And as you will see in a minute, what the ECCB will be using for digital cash, or Dcash as we call it, is a private blockchain, where the ECCB is in charge of the currency and issuing the currency. Very, very different from the so-called cryptocurrencies that are issued by no one, whose prices can be determined based on speculation, and where all sorts of things can go on. What we are proposing, as you will see, is an issuance by the central bank with the full authority of the central bank, value known as it has always been, certainly since 1976, $1 to 2.7 EC. Very important. So what attracts us to this technology? And I'm going to touch this very quickly because these have already been highlighted, some of these features in Dr. K's presentation. Transparency of transactions. We will know which are the users on the permission blockchain, and of course we'll be able to deal with the issue or minimize the issue of fraud, for example, and double spending. Auditability. Clearly, you want an audit trail. Blockchain technology allows you to have an audit trail. You think about cash in hand, physical cash, and tell me how much audit trail you have with that. You see where I'm going with this? Near immutability. That is, it's difficult to tamper. It's difficult. You will see them say immutability. I don't go that far. I say near immutability. Tamper-proof records, difficult for illicit actors to modify and attempt to alter for their ends and their benefit. So that takes me to the ECCB. All of what I've said so far really and truly boil down to our mandate to support economic growth and development in our member countries, financial stability and financial inclusion. I mentioned exclusion a while ago, and resilience and competitiveness. That's always, always in the back of our minds. In fact, front of our minds as we think about our mandate and how we discharge our mandates. So I now introduce the EC Digital Cash Pilot Project, Dcash, as we call it, based on blockchain. Interestingly enough, when the ECCB started this journey 2 years ago, there were a small number, relatively small number of central banks experimenting with central bank digital currencies. And you will see in the literature, CBDCs. It means central bank digital currencies. Today, 80% of all central banks are doing some work on digital currency. Some are more advanced than others. Some are doing research, some are actually doing real experiments, and some are looking to deploy live, like the ECCB. Now, we don't take credit for that at the central bank, although of course we are blazing the trail. What has really focused the minds of many central banks is the emergence of Libra in the last 12 months, for example, 12, 18 months. And the prospect that some private entity could potentially create a global or international digital currency. That prospect does not sit well with central banks, especially the large ones who are concerned about financial stability. And so many of the central banks that were hitherto reticent about getting involved have gotten involved because they want to be in control of that process as opposed to a private firm, entity, business. So for the Dcash, ECCB will use a private permission blockchain architecture. That simply means all entities will be known and can be identified. There shall be no anonymous users. Yes, you will have private information. Your information will be private, so it will not be seen by others. But the issuer of the currency, which is the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, will have the ability to, first of all, onboard users of the currency and to track and trace. So for example, if we got a request from the FIU on a certain suspicious transaction, we would have the ability to deal with that. Just to give you an example. All AML CFT protocols will have to be observed in the onboarding process. All transactions will be recorded on the blockchain and can be traced. So they're private, but if we need to trace them, we can. We know who and we know what, if we need to do that. Now, we won't be looking at everybody's business as the flows move, but the system allows us to track and trace if we need, if there's, for example, an investigation, we need to be involved in that. And as you will see, based on the parameters that are being set up, we minimize the risk of money laundering and financial terrorism by the controls that are set up from the jump. The AML CFT protocols that must be adhered to be onboarded on the Dcash platform. Predefined triggers, exactly what I was just saying. So just like you have in the banking system now, if somebody is earning $5,000 a month, and all of a sudden you start seeing them getting $50,000 and you see them getting deposit and getting withdrawal, red flag, that has to be checked. Somebody's working for $2,000, but they're driving a BMW that costs $150,000. Hello, clearly there's an issue. Those alerts will come and allow suspicious transaction activity reports to be filed if necessary, as we normally do now in the regular banking system. And like I said, all AML CFT requirements will apply. There are no exemptions where AML CFT is concerned with our digital cash. Financial integrity is paramount. Wallet limits. So essentially what the Dcash will offer are two wallets or two types of users. We'll have what we call a registered wallet, which is basically anybody who has an existing bank account or credit union account that is participating in the pilot. So if, let's say, I have an account at Republic Bank, I can open an account using Republic Bank. Republic Bank has already onboarded me. They already have a profile on me. Republic knows what my usual regular patterns of transaction is. If there's a deviance or deviation, red flag, they can file an SR with the FIU. So based on my profile, let's say I'm able to transact on a norm $7,000 a month. Then I can use Dcash up to $7,000, not a problem. My profile already exists. For customers who do not have a bank account or credit union account, or their bank or credit union is not participating in the pilot at this stage, they will have access to what we call a value-based wallet. And that is essentially based on a limit of $2,700 per month. So if you think about ATMs, you can only withdraw $1,200 or $1,500 per day. There's a limit. There will be a limit on the wallet, the value-based wallet. Still have to be onboarded, but unlike the bank or credit union where you are not known, where you're known, in this case, when you are being registered for the value-based wallet, the basic AML CFT will apply. And the limits are lower because, of course, we're operating with a different customer, as opposed to, say, the bank or credit union where you're known and your profile is already fully recorded and registered. So I go back to the question I asked at the beginning. Which form of cash is better suited to support financial integrity? And by now, you should have figured out the answer is digital cash. Physical cash is completely anonymous. That's why when you find drug dealers, you always find two things, cash and guns, and of course the drugs, the narcotics. So physical cash actually allows a lot of money laundering to take place. Because when the dollars are moving, you don't know from whence they came and where they're going next. Digital cash, traceable, auditable, all of those things make it harder for you to use it for money laundering and for corrupt activities. So digital cash by far is better for fighting money laundering than physical cash. So based on that, what does the future look like? Well, from our perspective at the central bank, we see a future where people use less physical cash, which is what you see in red, top of screen, and more digital cash, which is what you see in green, bottom of screen. So as people use less and less physical cash, we are expecting them to use more and more digital cash. And in this pandemic, where we have to be careful about the use of, the sanitizing, all of the things that we have to do to ensure that we keep the surfaces clean and we minimize contamination, we've been encouraging customers to use more digital channels. We believe customers will have a choice. And you can see on screen checks. We believe checks will not disappear entirely, but almost. Frankly spoken, we still use too many checks. But waste time, waste money, not good for the environment. And I could go into that, but I won't. Debit cards, credit cards, other sort of cards, and the cash. Customers will have choice, and they will make the choice of channel based on cost and convenience. And on right of screen, we give you what indicatively could be some of the reductions over time. So a 50% reduction in physical cash, an 80% reduction in use of checks, 50% increase in debit cards, 40% increase in credit cards, 60% increase in electronic, and everything that comes from physical, well, not everything, but some of it comes to digital, and you see a rise in the use of digital cash. This is not a firm scientific prediction. This is an aspiration, what could be for the future. And we believe the future is actually now. Now, let's move on. So I'm almost done. I think I have 2 or 3 slides left. Let's look forward. We're going to launch our digital cash pilot in soon. We're actually in the onboarding process now, training of the agents and merchants. So we have the institutions that we work with, the banks or credit unions. We have the agents to do the value-based wallet. So those are people who are not using a financial institution. They have to use an agent that we approve of. And obviously, one of the things we have to approve and will approve before we authorize them is the AML-CFT protocols. Those have to be in place. But we also have to onboard merchants, supermarkets, utility companies, gas stations, a range of services so that people can actually transact with digital cash. So that process is ongoing now. We got slowed down by the pandemic, like everything else. Everybody had to respond to that. But we are proceeding with onboarding. As we speak, we have, I think, 110 or 20 merchants onboarded or being onboarded. We expect that number to rise. And although we're going to start with 4 countries, Grenada, St. Lucia, Antigua and Barbuda, and St. Kitts and Nevis, we do plan to expand to the other 4 members of our currency union. So instead of doing the pilot for 6 months, we're going to probably do it for 12 months to allow the second 4 of our membership to be able to be part of the pilot experience as well. We are going to be sending to our parliaments a virtual assets bill. In fact, only last Friday, the Monetary Council, which is the highest decision-making body of the ECCB, made up of finance ministers, most of whom are prime ministers, approved a virtual assets bill. And that is important because in this period where virtual assets or digital assets, and we use the term virtual assets because that is what the FATF uses. I actually prefer digital, but FATF uses virtual assets. So just to make sure that we are clear and to help us with our mutual evaluation reviews, we've stuck to the term as used by the FATF. But virtual assets, digital assets, we now need to have a framework. Remember, I spoke about legal and regulatory frameworks being inadequate. That is an example. We do not have that right now. So we came together 2 years ago, the regulators led by the ECCB, and we agreed we would have a common legal framework for the ECCU, Eastern Caribbean Currency Union. That has been prepared and has been approved now at the level of the Monetary Council and will now be sent to the member countries where it's recommended that they enact them through their parliaments. I want to mention the Caribbean Digital Transformation Program. That program is in fact going to cover a range of things. And next Thursday, November 5th, I'll have a special ECTV Digital Dialogue, 10 a.m., dealing with this project, among other things. We'll have the Director General of the OECS, the Director for the Caribbean at the World Bank, the Director of ECTEL, and myself. What I will point out here is that it will cover data protection, unique digital identifiers, and Dr. K spoke to that need for national IDs, digital IDs, Jamaica, Estonia, and other places. We too will have to do that in the ECCU. That project will address some of that. Cybersecurity and resilience, must. That project will address some of that. Improve digital and financial literacy to be able to use digital tools and to also be able to use digital financial tools. We have to increase digital and financial literacy. And as we speak, this month, now soon ended, has been our Financial Information Month. And today, for example, we have a business symposium to help to raise the level of literacy in our region. And as always, cooperation and collaboration among regulators. That is absolutely important, without which we cannot effectively fight corruption. And sharing information, sharing lessons, sharing tools, joint training, MOUs, among others, are things that we have to continue to use to allow us to effectively wage this fight. And my final slide is that the unique features of blockchain technology render it a viable and promising tool in the fight against corruption. So I agree with Dr. K on that. Fulfilling the potential of blockchain will largely depend on policy and regulatory frameworks that allow innovation while managing risks. And that's why I mentioned the need for us to bring the legislation along. And that's what ECCB is helping with. And finally, the Dcash private permission architecture will help strengthen financial integrity in the ECCU. Of that, we are confident. So we see our pilot as not only helping with payments, but helping in the fight against corruption, hardening the financial system against crime, and offering potential beyond the financial system. Because I, for example, believe blockchain can be used in our region, not just for payments, but also for land registries, for health records management, and even for renewable energy. But that's another subject for another day. And with that, I thank you for your attention.
Right. So first, let me say that some of what I had intended to present has already been covered by Dr. Koranteng and Governor Antoine. But the theme of the program was basically to look specifically at how blockchain can help in the fight against corruption. My presentation will not center solely on blockchain, but on digital technology in general. And the reason I say that is that based on my research, blockchain technology has not yet been deployed by any of the banks in the OECS. In fact, I think no bank in the Caribbean has yet employed the technology. However, just let me say that as a partner with the ECCB in the launch of the ECCB's digital currency, that in some way we will be participating. But the direct use of blockchain technology right now is not part of any bank's infrastructure. The technology is still nascent, it is still in its infant stage. And as Dr. Koranteng would have pointed out, it is most useful when used for registries. There are some great benefits, as has been highlighted, but there are some vulnerabilities if it's not regulated. So it has to be regulated, and I think a lot of this has already been touched on by the previous two speakers. Now let's get straight into cash as an instrument of corruption. And the first thing we know that cash is considered as a liquid form of wealth, And we know how liquidity can quickly evaporate, particularly in climates like ours. It's also invisible, or as Governor Antoine said, it's anonymous. And that certainly aids in the hiding of wealth. It's also untraceable. For example, if you want to participate in some form of corruption, when you receive cash or when you pay out cash, the cash can be hidden, can be stored away, and no one would have any idea that it actually exists. So it does provide easy concealment, and it definitely acts as a magnet for criminals and by extension, corruption. As I said, my presentation is basically on digitization in general. So the use of digitization by banks in the fight against corruption, first, I want to say that it makes the process of corruption more difficult. And it is much more efficient and effective in the use of resources. Corruption consumes too many resources. For example, it consumes a lot of brain power, which could otherwise be utilized for the good of society. But it also utilizes other resources, human resources. In most cases, if not all, corruption can only be effective if two or more parties are involved. So again, that is utilization of a very valuable resource, which in this case, a human, can be utilized in more productive ways. But they also utilize other resources such as real estate. When I say real estate, in terms of actually hiding the ill-gotten cash, in terms of other utilities that you need in order to effect the corruption. The digitization also reduces the opportunity for theft and fraud. For example, if you are running a business and you have the infrastructure where all your payments, all purchases made are paid for electronically, either by digital cash or by credit card or debit card, or even through internet banking, it eliminates the opportunity for theft by your employee. It also eliminates the opportunity for fraud. It also is much more efficient for the merchants because with the digital technology, they get immediate credit to their accounts. So if you were being paid by check or by cash, there's going to be a delay before it's credited to your account. At best, in most cases, it's the next day when you either go to the bank yourself to make your deposit or you put your deposit in a depository. So digitization gives you immediate credit. And by getting immediate credit, it reduces your cost of borrowing. When your account is credited, it reduces your overdraft, if you have an overdraft, and most businesses do. And therefore, you pay less overdraft interest. The public treasury is also enhanced by the use of either blockchain or other digital technologies, in the sense that if corruption is eliminated or at least reduced, then the extra resources can go to where it was intended to go, the public treasury, and then the proceeds can be used for the public good, for the public benefit, rather than for the benefit of corrupt individuals and their families. It also eliminates or reduces risks associated with manual methods of payment, and I think the governor already dealt with this. So in a nutshell, according to IBM in a workshop they had in 2018, these are the benefits of blockchain and by extension, digital technology. And most of these have already been covered by the two previous speakers: greater transparency, enhanced security, improved traceability, increased efficiency and speed, and reduced costs of transactions. So in closing, I would like to say that cash will always be king, but we need to get some new clothes for that king. We need to divest that king of the liquid form of cash and the solid form of cash, and to clothe it in the digital form of cash. And with that, I say thank you, and I make myself available for any questions or comments.